Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Circle of Wisdom. My name is Christopher Witecki, and this is our weekly show where we hang out and gab about the spiritual topics. This is really a meeting of two Christophers, and where they sometimes cross. Please welcome my co-host, Christopher Onefeather. Hello, Master Onefeather. How are you today? I'm
really doing well, and of course, this is that season of celebrations, so Shana Tova.
You're totally over my head. What is that, sir? Explain.
Well, we're entering into actually tonight's meal, and the sundown of it will mark Jewish New Year.
Okay.
And so, if you have Jewish friends today and tomorrow, you might want to, give them a little heads up and say Shana Tova, which means good year or happy year.
That's really cool. I need an app that helps me to identify cultures and when is their holiday, because I just don't know. I don't even know. I barely can keep a track of Easter, but I'll say I'm definitely feeling the vibration changing. I have to say that the sun moving out of Virgo and into Libra was a distinct change. Did you feel that, Mr. Sensitive Pisces?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that. I think one of the things that was a build-up as the sun finally flipped over into Libra was, for a lot of people, they were feeling a need for a quest. They were feeling a need for finding answers, and I think that was that positioning of Mars going through the process of squaring Neptune from Sagittarius to Pisces. We had a somewhat significant edge on those two planets interactive, and I think that kind of added a little juice to the advancement of the sun into the sign of Libra.
I have to say, absolutely. And here's a little thing of the chart. I think Mars, you think it's the square to Neptune that made everything hit more real, huh? Because
yeah.
Go ahead, yes, sir.
Well, I think that, whenever Neptune is in the spin, you're trying to get through the fog bank. You're trying to get out of that realm of things that are undefined. Neptune lives in a state of abstract consciousness. And, of course, Mars is very visceral. Mars is, very down to earth. Let's get her done. Let's, march over the hill. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, I for myself, I agree with that analysis. Absolutely. I think Virgo is extremely heavy. But for myself, I think Mars in Scorpio was the subconscious annoyance, like that we were unsatisfied to me. And I think is loose emotional boundaries. But yes, by facing these some of the boundaries we absolutely face was reality versus fantasy.
That's absolutely right, yeah, and we're seeing a lot of Pluto's activity, as it's starting to, hit that 11th degree in Capricorn now. It's really fully online. It's kind of juiced up, and I think that, of course, is in the spin. It's in sextile to Chiron in Pisces, so there's a lot of Piscean energy going on, and the sun has finally flipped over and gotten away from that opposition to its activity in Virgo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're feeling, and I have a chart up of the planets today. The sun is at 1 degree Libra. The moon has just come off the new moon, so we're definitely feeling it and experiencing it. Mercury's way ahead, so we've thought all the way through this. But what Master Onefeather is referring to is Mars, and this is what I want to point out is Mars is now in Sagittarius and forming a grand trine with Jupiter and Uranus here. So now Mars is off in a fire sign and pushing basically new beliefs and at the moment and a refreshing of our beliefs. And when the sun in Libra, these new beliefs are basically championing new relationships. And that's what I want to talk about today, Master Onefeather, was human relationships.
Yes, and integrating ourselves into the social order, becoming part of our tribe.
And with us today on vocal is Mary Neva, who is a Libra. Hi, Mary.
Hi, how are you?
So happy to have your Libra-ness here with us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
We'll be referring to it. So in these early chapters, these early degrees of the Sun in Libra, it's been my experience as an astrologer that the early degrees of the 7th house or Libra have to do with the relationship to ourself. And then from that relationship to ourself, we basically form relationships to the rest of the world. And that's what Libra energy is how we relate. How do you capsulize Libra energy, Master One?
Well, yeah, I think you're definitely very accurate with that interpretation. I think, if you really, I tend to look at just the chart itself as far as coming to conclusions about processes going on within the heavens. And 6 months ago, as the Sun entered Aries, it descended. Basically, it went into the lower half of the chart, and there we were doing the inner work. We were discovering who we are. We were trying to define ourselves, trying to create a sense of identity and purpose. And then as the Sun gets over to the other side, it emerges, and it's coming up above that horizon line. And that's our emergence, the ego, our identity emerging into the social order and becoming a part of the collective, getting invested in all of the activities that thrill us or bother us, or, this is the time to rally the troops and get out there and conquer whatever it is that needs to be conquered.
Well, I think the United States has a long list of things it wants to conquer, so does the Soviet Union. So it'll be interesting to see who conquers what at this time. And I have to say, I have to go back to the relationship to the self, though, and I want to ask you some questions about that because, all the great, spiritual leaders all bring it back to your relationship to yourself. And really, I have found in my research with people that the way you respond to yourself ends up being the way people in life respond to you. But I wanted to ask about, in your life and in American culture, in general, there's not much effort that goes on to looking at how we relate to ourselves. Even in the major religions, you're always praying outward to God. You're never really looking at yourself unless you see a therapist, I was going to ask you, in the American Indian culture, what was the importance of knowing yourself?
Well, I think for Native American, and actually for a lot of the tribal societies, not just confined to Native American, but
sure,
all of the tribes tend to look at community as self. So once again, boom, we just went back to the whole Libra energy.
Right, yeah.
For Native Americans, self-aggrandizement was definitely frowned upon. It was really not socially acceptable to want to build an estate, to want to collect all of these accoutrements that show off your ego's identity.
I understand, but what about spiritual relationship? I mean, I guess they had a relationship to the heavens, but did a young American Indian, I say American Indian because it's your own colloquial history, but do tribal nations, I mean, surely that young warrior or whatever ends up getting pissed with himself and has to deal with himself somewhere off in the woods that can't get something, or
Well, yeah, exactly. What would happen as a young man or a young maiden was growing up, they would have that confrontation with the untamed ego and making their demands on society, and they would be shunned. And that was a time to withdraw, to go on a vision quest, and to seek an identity beyond just I want, I need, I demand. So for the tribal peoples, those rites of passage could be initiated at the age of 10 or 11, or it could happen when you're 15, 16, depending on culture. But there was a point when you arrived at that knowingness that you needed to retreat and actually claim a bigger sense of self than just this ego that has its demands, its needs, its fears, that sort of thing.
Okay, so that's what I thought. I mean, I thought there were at least, yeah, there was that approach. Still, though, I find in my spiritual research that very little is talked about as far as the relationship to the self. I bring up Mahatma Gandhi a lot because I know he, as a Libra, was extremely angry as a young man. The Gandhi that we know, the friendly Gandhi, came after he spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours weaving and creating fabric in order to work through his own anger with himself and his anger with the world. So to me, this first, I agree with you. We're going to end up talking about every human relationship on the planet. But the first one to me that matters the most, and I think this is what Mars in the early Sagittarius is the way you literally approach yourself or respond to yourself. So when your parent came in and yelled at you for having a messy room, to me, what changes us is not that our parent yelled at us. What changes us or not changes us is once our parent leaves, what do we say to ourselves? Do we yell at ourselves also? Do we go, oh man, we've got a bitchy mom? Do we, what is that relationship to ourselves? And I have found that in human relationships and in dynamics in people's charts and other people, that you can find out basically every relationship that comes to them, your boss and whatnot, that first wave of law of attraction is all based on that relationship to the self. So vision quest is kind of necessary is what I'm thinking. But
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the world, we're in an interesting spot. Mars is moving into Sagittarius, Master One Feather. Here's the chart if you haven't seen it in the last 5 seconds. And what's interesting is we have, of course, Jupiter in Leo, Uranus in Aries, and Mars in Sagittarius, this grand trine. And, what this is, folks, is a change in our overall passion is what this is in the background. So this is really the potential for big change because Jupiter in Leo says we're going after our hearts. Uranus in Aries says do it differently. And Mars in Sagittarius is saying move forward with what you believe. Here's the thing, though. Saturn is heading for that space in December. So whatever it is we think we believe will probably change. What do you think, Master One Feather?
Well, yeah, I think so. But I think more relevant to that passage is the idea of Saturn as a teacher. So it's not just about change, but it's about revelation and being taught by this transit of Saturn as it enters into Sagittarius about our true higher identity. We had that discussion, I think, maybe 2 or 3 years ago about there are three groupings within the wheel, and the first starts off with Aries, and that's personal self. The second grouping starts off with Leo, and that's the self that wants to be out on stage. That's the self that wants to get out there and celebrate life. The third section that we look at is Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is the self burning off. We see the fire element really coming up in Sagittarius, where we're burning off that false sense of self and beginning to take steps in the direction of discovery of the higher, the truer self, which is, our truth is that we are expressions of God. And whatever our definition of God might be, that is ultimately what we are aspiring to express and to embrace. So Sagittarius time is always very, very much a part of the spiritual journey, because if you'll watch Sagittarians, a lot of times they will go through this period of ego-aggrandizement, self-indulgence, and but they're burning this off. It's like a fire that's out of control, and they burn off that shell of self, and then as they advance into Capricorn, they learn how to deal with possessions and ownership, and they can be gluttonous. I mean, absolutely.
They absolutely are gluttonous. Absolutely.
Yeah, they indulge.
Oh, but absolutely.
And the only way you can get out of that trap of being attached to the material world is to become a glutton, is to overdo it, And then Aquarius is all about once again, identifying society not as just a bunch of people, a mob, or a bunch of random humans, but seeing the unified consciousness, seeing the spiritual unity in all of humankind. And then, of course, Pisces is the cycle of return. Jesus was a March 1st Pisces, according to a lot of astrologers. And that makes a lot of sense, because when you're at that final stage, you're ready to step out of the mortal, condition, and to transcend all of the limitations of our mortality, and to get, to that next stage of reunion or atonement. We've got in 10 days here, we've got
You're talking about when the moon cycles?
No, actually, we start off with Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year, and then we arrive at a point which is called Yom Kippur, and that is the atonement, the coming together, the being at one with God. So again, our discussion is very relevant to this season, because this was celebrated by most of the Middle Eastern peoples as a time when you really started to think about, who am I in relationship to God, and do I want to go back and reunite with God?
Yes, it ends up there. I mean, that's basically Christmas Eve.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is actually that whole, like, am I going back to God or not? Now there's no hot girls around the pool and I'm stuck in the winter house. Do I believe in God? There's a darkness there. Bringing it back to Mars in early Sagittarius, though, all the way to the beginning. You say Sagittarius is burning things off. I mean, I think they burn off self-limiting beliefs. I think they burn off incorrect beliefs. I mean, you could almost say that's why we have holy wars, so to speak, is burning off, burning this off. Does it have to burn off instantly? That's a question. It seems with my Sag friends it sure does. They have to get drunk enough times to say, I said I can't do it this week.
Yeah, and I think that is just the human experience. I think that, once again, the ego is so rigidly attached to the material experience that it has to overdo itself, pardon me, before we can actually step back.
Oops, we lost him for a second there. No problem. Thanks for muting.
Yeah.
Thanks. With Ebola and stuff, that's a polite thing to do on guided hangouts, is to mute yourself.
I think Ebola is another one of those boogeymen that gets bandied around every once in a while.
Let's talk about. That's what Margin Sag is, though. Is those young boogeymen and burning through these false beliefs or whatever, and so. We have to. I think the three fire signs are connected. So Aries action energy is connected to the belief structure. We have to act on our beliefs as people and see that they work or don't work. There's just something in that makes us have to do that. And in this, really, I think with Mars and Sag, to bring it back to the planets, I think the first thing we're doing here in the next few days, from Wednesday to the next Wednesday, is burning through our own self-limiting beliefs. That keep us from being fair to ourselves, which I think is what the first chapter of Libra is. It's time to, and I think there's a lot. This is where I bring the circle to conversation about relationships on Earth. I think that, like I said, we don't have a lot of relationship to ourselves or conscious around that in the American culture, but in the 70s, you got a little blast of, I think, the direction of where Libra may be heading. We had Neptune in Libra, we had Pluto in Libra, and for a few years, I think a lot of that demonstrating and anti-war stuff and everything was that push for equality and Libra energy. What was your recollection of Libra in the 70s?
Libra and society as a whole, I thought, was very fascinating, because everybody was trying to be as balanced as they could be, or at least, the ones who were consciously a part of the wave that was unfolding. And that was when we developed a sense of political correctness. So, once again, the pendulum that I was talking about swung from one extreme to the other. And we went from being brain dead about social issues and social order to being so hypersensitive about that whole, bigger vision, that it was actually overwhelming at times. People were too sensitive. People got too anal about, being politically correct and being on point with their thoughts about whatever was going on within society, and it was on both sides of the spectrum. The political revolutionaries as well as the old school were always butting heads over minutia. So for me, the 70s and late 60s kind of got exhausting with that sense of creating a standoff. I'm on this side and you're on that side.
Yeah, by the time Jimmy Carter came, the Libra energy had blown its load, and he was a Libra, so he came like Libras a little too late. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Well, but see that higher vibration of the air energy, Aquarius, which is what Ronald Reagan was, staged this whole situation to shame Carter and to oust him and to get rid of the Democrats as a organized party, essentially. And so they pulled off that crap with the with the oil embargo and all that, and it was really.
And the CIA hostages, the Iran hostages, was all CIA botched thing. George Bush Sr. was the CIA director. Hello.
Yeah. And and in addition to that, Israel was acting out too. We had a lot of activity in the Sinai Peninsula, and so it was an edgy area. And if you really watch Libras, one of the things that I'm most fascinated by is that most of my Libra male friends either have a lot of guns or a lot of knives or a lot of both.
Yes, they're very aggressive, actually. Surprisingly aggressive. Very cowboy. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is the Wild West or Aussie mentality. They're, yeehaw, giddy up kind of mentality. And it's fascinating to watch them.
This is a great segue to Alexa Sanmore, who joined our conversation, because she is the mother of a little Libra who is, I can't remember how old, but have you, Alexis, and she's also the co-host of Modern Mommies, by the way, and today you guys are going to be talking about hyperactive children, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That's correct.
And this comes maybe from...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming... You're bouncing a little bit, actually, in and out. Oh, there's her mom now, so her son now, I think. But I was going to ask her when she comes back in, she has a Libra child, and how hyperactive or aggressive Libra children are.
I think my son has been working on balance. He's about to be 3, and he's doing pretty well right now. I had to put my foot down about behaviors, but it's been working. So I see that truth and justice. He understands once I explain it to him.
Huh? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've noticed that with him, that he does process it, and he does seem to be motivated by doing it better. And there is this weird little secret game at doing it better with people inside them.
Mm-hmm.
But Libras are actually, as Master One Feather was saying, I don't know if you caught, but like Libras have for all that wanting to, come together and be your friend, there's an aggressive side. What about you, Mary? Do you identify with that aggressive cowboy side, the background of yourself? Oh, now she's without voice.
Unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Not necessarily with the guns and stuff, but I realized that, especially back in the 70s, I was probably about 16, and I had sisters that were hippies out in the Democratic Convention, and I had brothers that were over in Vietnam coming back. One wanted to be there, one wanted to be, just was drafted. And having a family full of people that had pulled on the spectrum from wanting to be there or against the war entirely, and I was like, I understood both ways they were going, but I was very mad at the fact that we as a country hadn't made a decision one way or the other, and that we had so much unrest and hurt and death, and I was definitely pulled in both directions.
Yeah, there's definitely it's both sides. There's always both sides of the coin, and one could argue, Master One Feather, that all that Libra energy is what ended up penting up a lot of aggression, where the industrial war complex then got a good 8-9 years of the 80s on us.
Yeah, it definitely amped up things. You know, Christopher, I have a little story. Go ahead, Alexis.
Oh, I just wanted to interject and say I think I misunderstood you, Christopher. Yes, okay, so my son half the time is just this incredible embodiment of love and calmness, and the other half of the time he carries in his multiple pockets in his pants, all at the same time, 2 foam swords, a battle axe, and a Thor hammer.
There you
all
go.
the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a Thor hammer, just to keep it like, you know, going back to his Atlantis life. I love that. Yeah.
Well, you'll have to play Maxwell's Silver Hammer for him by the Beatles. That'll be his theme song.
He likes the Beatles. Yeah.
There is, and that's the weird flip side. So if people don't know Libra, Libras are Arises in their personal relationships. They're very self-centered and very aggressive when it comes to their personal relationships, and that's the ironic twist of Libra energy. It's willing to fight or go to war to correct the equation, and sometimes Libra energy is more obsessed with correcting the equation than what it's correcting, I find, too, as far as what the dangers can be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Libras set themselves up for defeat. They go out and they find a situation where they can't win because they are learning boundaries. You know, everybody says, oh, Libras, it's all about balance. They're so balanced. But if you're around a Libra, and believe me, I've been around mother, father,
oh, really? Both parents are Libras? Oh, we're learning into the psyche of Master One right now. No wonder you're so calm.
Well, and my grandmother was a Libra, and she was a primary caregiver when I was growing up. So I had all this Libra energy. But nonetheless, if you observe Libras, and really this is the truth with anything, you don't need to get involved in a lot of deep study. If you really want to understand life, just become the observer. Just observe what's going on around you. But by observing Libras, you will discover that myth of their being balanced all the time is actually just a myth. What they do is they will consciously or they will unconsciously set up the equation so that they throw everything around them out of balance in order to have to address that whole theme of creating balance. That's how they teach themselves balance on a very profound level of the soul.
By spiritually throwing up on us and throwing us into there.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you also have to have a buffer zone if you have Libras around you, because they can create a hell of a lot of chaos. And,
most certainly.
Yeah, and that Mars energy, that aggressive masculine side of the Libra energy can get hysterical when things don't go their way, and 9 times out of 10 things won't go their way.
Oh, yeah, hysterical is the word. My sensei, Master Gwen, her little joke is that Libras are the least faithful sign in the zodiac. Another myth about them, because if they want to play a dynamic, they'll play it, and because they feel as, I think, more of a master of relationships than anyone else on the planet. Just like Scorpio ego feels more master of sex, Libras do feel like they have mastered humans more than the average human. There's almost this cockiness that allows them to be aggressive and go after things, and it comes out of nowhere. What seems as calm and balanced, all of a sudden they're all over the road. Sometimes. Yeah, actually, one last Libra bash, and this just because it came to mind, but an insurance company did a study of the astrology signs and car accidents, and the #1 car accident sign was Libra, ironically. Yeah, and it had to do with their aggressive driving and them being all over the road, I guess. So, not that insurance companies had the right to charge more or anything, but I just thought it was interesting how they could be that way.
That's fascinating. Well, I was going to share that 1970s insight with you. This is kind of very atypical of the energy of the 70s. I was in Marin County, and we all know that marvelous Marin is very infatuated with itself. So a lot of the people living in Marin County were very flagrant about their spirituality and about, you know, their possessions and their brand new Mercedes and yada yada yada. And at that period, I was still doing my artwork, and I was wholesaling watercolors to a gallery in Marin. And I was in the gallery, and I was talking about something with the gallery owner. And this woman was kind of hedging around. It was like she was purposely eavesdropping, trying to not eavesdrop. And finally, she turns around and looks me right in the face, and she said, "You are such an opinionated person." You know, and I'm sure she had just been to her Buddhist meditation, whatever. And I turned around,
Damn liberals.
I turned around to her, and I said, "But only in your opinion, my dear." And she blew a gasket. I mean, she was like hysterical, and she stomped out of the gallery. But now, to me, that is very atypical of a Libra reaction, is that they'll point the gun, pull the trigger, and realize that they just shot themselves in the foot.
Yes, that is very common. Yeah, they're not really. That is very common. That is hilarious and a good share. You know, interesting about the Libra energy at this time in this moment is we have Uranus and Aries now, so we literally are in the background, kind of re-examining if we're going to pounce or not pounce. You know, to correct a situation, and I think that is kind of our gut reaction has been to pounce or not pounce. I have to drive it all back to my original point, which is I think in the background, the Libra is out trying to correct the world because the Libra isn't feeling balanced or correct with themselves. There's at the end of the day not this consciousness that's making sure we're okay before we go out there. And part of the obsession is, don't you think subconsciously in the background, everything they're trying to fix is themselves, Master One Feather? That's what I'm asking. You know?
Oh, you know, absolutely. I think that's definitely the theme here. Is that they're consciously observing themselves within society. They're seeing the reflection back, and it pisses them off because they realize that the screen of society is a reflection of what's going on within them. Mm-hmm. And that causes a lot of frustration, a lot of angst, a lot of inner turmoil. And, you know, all three air signs, they get amped up real easily. They're very nervous by nature. So when they start getting frustrated with themselves, that air energy is very much like, you know, sound waves. It is a conductor, and they're like a drum head. They start to vibrate, and they get, you know, really crazy.
They do get a little crazy. They get a little shifty-eyed and need to kind of be helped there. Mm-hmm. In the spirit of talking about relationship to ourselves, go ahead, Alexis. I was actually going to segue to you, but go ahead.
Well, being the mother of a little Libra and seeing him just almost at 3 years with just complete id or ego at this point, just acting naturally himself. He's like that. The minute he can't do something, the minute something doesn't work for him, he just throws himself on the floor. And it used to be a thing. Like, he'd just get consumed with that energy, but luckily for him, I'm his mom, so I've taught him how to take deep breaths, that I'll just say, okay, well, you could do that, or you could calm down and solve your problem. And so now he knows to stop. But it's still the first reaction. He's just now learned how to overcome it, or is learning. But yeah, every time something happens, his first reaction is, it's not, it's not pleasant.
and that brings up my point and underscores also your topic today on Modern Mommies, which is how to deal with hyperactive children. But to underscore it, you are giving him an alternative way of calming down with himself, which then changes his behavior in the world. And one of the big topics, your topic today in your show, is to medicate or not medicate for these types of things, you know, and that leads me to something I want to bring up. As far as the relationship to ourself, I'm going to keep bringing it back to relationship to ourself, even though Master One Feather, I agree, we're heading to society, probably next week, big time, but I think a lot of times we are ignoring that relationship to ourselves and the fact that we ourselves need to, we are upset and need to calm down on our own. You know, like with the religious wars and whatnot going on with Mars and Sagittarius, they're super angry. People are angry about their God is better than your God. But isn't that because you're angry with God yourself that you're out there charging? So the question is, how's that working, Alexis? As far as, I mean, I know you will never medicate your child. I know that. I don't want to give away the ending to your show.
Okay. No. So what exactly is the question?
So the question is you sit down, you time out your Libra. It's really about him with himself. Does that satisfy him to calm down with himself? Does that satisfy his desire to charge out in the world?
Well, I happen to know a lot about energy, and that's what I teach my students in my children's program. I think if you can, now the reason I teach children is because adults just seem way too attached to their garbage. I guess I'll say it nicely.
It's not fun. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Children, however, understand when I am able to teach them about how it feels in their body. So my son, when he gets upset, his whole body shuts down and he can't function to make a good idea. So I'm teaching him ways to open back up, deep breathing techniques, like he does ohms at 3 years old, and then the ideas can come so you can solve it. You can be happy. Also, you know, he's 3. If he wants something out of the fridge, he could throw a fit and get in trouble and not get it, or he could take a deep breath and be happy and share that joy in the room, and people will help him. So I'm teaching him that. I'm teaching him energy flow, and I think if you catch that early on, then you don't need to medicate, because then you're able to have some kind of control over your own neurons, your own circuitry. But if you don't catch that until later, it makes it a lot harder.
Well, that's my whole argument, and thank you for underscoring it, is that unless you have a conscious dialogue about your relationship to yourself, no relationship in the world will ever, I think, end up working to your satisfaction, because when you're out there in the world campaigning in relationships, you're really campaigning for some sort of secret win inside yourself, and I think that's part of the whole Libra dynamic. Taking it to the society level, Master One Feather, you know, this is, you know, taking it back. Let me give a history lesson. You know, when Pluto was in a Capricorn, the United States went through the American Revolution, and once Pluto was in Aquarius and we were elevating ourselves, one of the things that ended up happening in the elevation was the two-party system. You had Thomas Jefferson and other cabinet members actually starting to turn on George Washington behind the scenes, sending rumors and stuff. And so we divided into this two-party system, and we've been in this two-party system ever since. Speaking to personal conflict and balance at the end of the day, do you feel like this is just an inevitability of society to go back and forth forever on this scale, or is there a higher form of Libra here we're not seeing?
Well, I think it's. I think this goes back to the fundamental nature of this material universe that we're currently inhabiting, which is based on and fueled by duality. You know, you have the positive end of the battery and the negative end of the battery, and that's if you really look at elections, if you look at, you know, the dynamics of human history throughout 10,000 years of recorded history, you'll find that every time there's a surge in one direction, there's a counter surge that comes along in the other direction. And the pendulum is always swinging, but it never really arrives at a point where it's in the middle. So, and you'll have to pardon my telephone, which is behind me, so I can't grab it.
Gotcha.
But nonetheless, I think that was definitely inevitable. As soon as, and you know, if you go to Britain and look at how Parliament operates in Great Britain, and you go to most other world councils, you'll find that it's by a very narrow margin that they agree on this is the path we're going to take. In our elections, 4 or 5 points is a landslide. You know, 3 points to the left or to the right is generally what clinches the election. And so I think that is just the nature of the universe that we have generated. Now, as to whether or not that can change, I think yes. Once we transcend this lower, heavier vibration of material reality and start to aspire to a higher way of life.
Froze there for a second. Go ahead.
And one of the ways that you can get a vision of that is looking at the Celestine Prophecy. You know, that book has been around forever, and there is a description at the end of the book of a world that sheds the material vibration, and all of a sudden you're in a much higher energetic plateau. I think that's what we're moving toward.
I agree. I would say, but I would say the process is actually, how do you shed the material world? You got to have a relationship to yourself that tells you don't need it. Like you got to relate to yourself differently. You got to say to yourself, we don't need this, and that's in the end a different relationship to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the foundations of A Course in Miracles is a affirmation that goes, I am not a body. I am free. I am as God committed me. And God created you as a spiritual expression of itself. So, and we were the ones who decided, oh, I want to be over here by myself. I'm going to run away for an adventure. And the only way we could do that was to create a bumper car, our human body. You know, and while there is an immense amount of beauty, because we are the expressions of the divine, so we do create this phenomenal beauty, but it also is transient by nature, because we're trying to step away from our source.
Did you want to interject someone? No? Anyone?
I
did.
Go ahead, Alexis.
Well, first of all, I love that Celestine Prophecy. I read it when I was 14, and it completely made me into the weirdo I am today, thank goodness. That was a long time ago. But I was going to say that I think doing it on a personal level, now that we're older, is hard, and it's going to take a lot of relaxing and just letting go and allowing. But where it won't be hard, and where I think it will be the most dynamic on a society level, is with the children, which is why I'm teaching children about understanding how their energy works inside of them. But something really neat that I was thinking about today is I read on Facebook, I saw this post about these kids, I don't remember where, honestly, but in 5 high schools in their county, the kids all got up and walked out to protest a school board decision to make their history, to change the history so that it is a little bit nicer and doesn't promote disruption. So they got really upset, and all the kids got up and walked out of school all at the same time out of
fighting
high schools.
Fighting for the truth of history? These kids rose up to fight for the truth of history in books? No way.
Yes.
Where is this?
And they organized...
In Connecticut?
Okay,
Where was this? Where was this? Somewhere highly white and educated. No, you don't have to answer now. But I think I believe you. I'm not challenging you on the topic. I'm just saying it's just actually pretty fascinating. Well,
it happened yesterday, and it was in the paper post. But what it made me think of is they organized it on Facebook, and I don't know if y'all remember, but a while, I don't know, 15 years ago, we were worried about what the kids were going to be like growing up in a world that's plugged in. And I'm starting to think that these kids are incredibly educated and they're connected. And and I think some really good stuff is going to come from that.
Oh, it's going to get insane in that regard. We'll bring it back to world politics and the two-party system and debate and balance. Here's what I'm saying, in my opinion. I think it all circles around to the relationship to ourself, and I'm hoping, Master One Feather, that we can evolve our idea of balance to be a higher resolution. In other words, it's not that we have one side that wants abortion and one side that doesn't want abortion. It's that every human being acknowledges that parts of themselves are Republican and parts of themselves are Democrat, and maybe we can all become like Republicrats, you know, and just be honest as a more of a line item veto of issues versus a policy swing. I'm hoping that's where the earth evolves. But you think there'll always be that bare bottom bowling alley, huh, where people are just going to fight it out?
Well, I think that, again, the material reality that we're experiencing is contingent upon the ego. The ego is projecting materiality. And as we begin to shift our identity in gradual stages away from the ego self and start to aspire or to embrace a sense of God self, recognizing our union with, the Creator.
That's a very private, but that is a relationship with yourself where you're very privately satisfied under a tree. Like,
right. Well, no, I think that you take this out into the world. I think that we
once
have
you achieve
brilliant
it,
examples.
yeah, sure.
And I think that that is the direction the collective is going. And I think a major shift is starting to occur because we do have the internet. We do have global communication.
Right, I agree.
And there is that beginning of the awakening. Even 20 years ago, the Native Americans were all very, very antagonistic, frustrated, angry. Now you're seeing that greater awakening where they realize, okay, every tribe on the earth has gone through, God only knows what kind of oppression, because that's how we're reclaiming our truth is through our tribal consciousness. Exploring the unconscious realms, exploring the mystical realms, that sort of thing.
It's the only thing we have left because we don't trust
Right.
religion, we don't trust anything, and I'll have to say too, I'd say the American tribes anyways have been getting money, right, from casinos and things, so that things have been lightening up for them to relax a bit.
Oh yeah, and they're discovering their true identity. I think that Native American spirituality has gotten very, very deep. And they have become teachers, which was prophesied by a lot of different schools of Native American spiritual vision. So as we see this starting to segue into where the tribes are coming back and unifying, the ultimate outcome will be the realization that there's really only one tribe, and that's the Earth tribe. And there are various interpretations of that, just as there is only one being, and we're, the variety of humankind is merely individual expressions of that being. So there's that circle consciousness, the realization that it's all contained in the circle, it's all part of the oneness that is starting to emerge now.
And today they call that Burning Man. That's what they call that today, Master.
Well,
that's the only tribe left on the planet, from what I hear.
That's kind of an extreme example of I want to go away and piss on the campfire. So.
Oh, you would have been pissing on the campfire in the 1970s at Burning Man, or would you have sat that one out in Marin County, sir?
No, neither one. I was listening to Sirius Radio this morning, and when I was driving around getting the grandson off to school. And Sirius Radio has a Grateful Dead channel, and that's what I was doing. I was following the Dead.
Nice. Peace and brotherhood. I went to a Dead concert. They were still around before they died. I was what a young adult was able to go see, and I have to say it was quite an impression if anyone hadn't gone. Talk about Libra unity. Now, I know a lot of it is instigated by acid, and today probably ecstasy, but there was this incredible, I have to say, I have never felt such a unity consciousness of so many people in one spot. That's true.
Yeah, Jerry Garcia, who was a Leo, he was
Teddy bear.
Brilliant. Yeah, and he was brilliant in his communication with music. His music was a unique source of unified experience, unified consciousness. And one of the things that you would go to at a Dead concert, and it would take 2 or 3 concerts before people could really become a part of the group, part of the tribe.
Or 3 tabs.
Yeah, well, no, not really, because I'd say 20% at max were acid heads. The rest of it.
That's fair. And yeah.
But what would happen is you'd go there and you'd see all these people and they're dancing, but it seems like they're dancing to something besides the music, because the music's going over here, and everybody's got their own rhythm going.
What is she doing? Yeah, exactly.
Right. And the actual fact was that, well, there was the background music, but then Jerry's guitar. Jerry was often out there doing his own riffs.
He was on an acid trip. He was just like right.
Or heroin, or whatever the drug.
Or whatever it was. Yeah, it was. But it was a guitar trip. He was off somewhere on another planet, and people were
the people were dancing to his riffs, but the rest of the band was giving him the anchors. So you'd go there and you'd see this astonishing expression of something, and you couldn't really define it. It was really
it's kind of modern jazz. Yeah, like acid jazz. It was kind of modern jazz, really, in that stream of consciousness. Alexis, what did you want to say?
I had the pleasure of studying shamanic meditation for years under Nikki Scully and Gloria Taylor Brown. The Nikki Scully in particular, she was the sacred pipe keeper for the Grateful Dead. And she and
Pipe
Jerry,
keeper?
they did the Egypt thing.
What's
Sacred
a
pipe keeper.
Really? Is that like a fluffer in a porn? What does a pipe keeper do in for the Grateful Dead? They keep it loaded, the bong loaded.
She was the healer, and I'm not sure what exactly was involved in that title.
I'm just curious.
But
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, see,
did Egypt a lot, so he was very into that sacred shamanic journeying as well. And I have some really great meditation music that he did for Nikki. So
really?
Shamanic Journeys. Yeah, shamanicjourneys.com I think is our website, but you can find, my favorite is the elephant meditation. But yeah, he did all the music. It's the meditation music I use for my kids. It's
Jerry Garcia did the meditation music?
Yeah.
Holy shift! So that's a good revelation and a perfect way to really wrap up, folks. Thank you so much, team, for talking to us. This is the Son of Libra. We're talking about relationship to ourselves, and if you need to relate to yourself differently, you can always check out the Gary. You're gonna give us that information, Alexis, and we'll put it in the write-up of this show, if you would.
Nikki Scully, and her website is shamanicjourneys.com, and I think you can find the CDs on that website.
Okay, awesome. We'll put it also in the description of this video. But if people don't know, Master One Feather is available for personal readings at soulmart.me. He does 15-minute and 30-minute readings. I, too, do readings down at soulmart.me. And Alexis Ann Moore is the co-host of Modern Mommies, which will be live here in about another hour if people want to stick around. Thanks, everyone, for joining the conversation. Thank you, Master One Feather. Any parting words of wisdom as we cast off into the Libra moonlight?
Yes, well, one of the things that we do at this New Year celebration time is in Hebrew tradition, the Hebrew tribe, you get an apple. And we were up in Wisconsin at an orchard getting apples over the weekend. And you take the apple, slice it up, and you dip it in honey. And that is how you celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And you will hopefully have a sweet year ahead if you dip your apple in honey.
Well, that's awesome. I love that. Everyone go dip your apple in honey, and we will see you in 7 days. Thank you, Mary and Alexis, for joining us this week. Anyone else is welcome to join us, too, at tweettalk.tv. Just come to tweettalk.tv. You'll see a chat room on the right. We always post a link there. Otherwise, thank you for watching our show. We'll see you in 7 days with more interesting conversation. Have a good week, my friends, and live, love, be.